Hey Guru Nation, welcome back to the clinicaltrialsguru.com. This is Dan Sfera. I believe it is episode 86 of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru, something like that. So I'm riding a solo today, but I wanted to talk to you about a very important topic, okay? I think it's a really good one for you research clinics for sure. I also think that some of you CROs and pharma companies might find it interesting also. So it's the value and importance and underratedness of nurse practitioners. So, special shout out to everyone watching on YouTube as well. Thank you. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. There are oftentimes podcast only exclusive stuff, and vice versa if you're listening on the podcast. There's many YouTube only videos, so go to both, okay? That's the plan. That's the master plan, is to get you on both. So, nurse practitioner is extremely underrated. First of all, for those that don't know what a nurse practitioner is, it's an RN with additional schooling, okay? Additional certifications, additional education. They're able to have a private practice of their own. In some states, like California, which is one of the stricter ones, they have to be supervised by a physician, but in many states they don't. Okay, and even in the stricter states like California, they need to have a supervising physician that is the same specialty as they are. So I work with a lot of psychiatric nurse practitioners, and they have to have psychiatrists as their supervising physicians. But they're able to have their own private practice, separate from the physician. The physician just needs to supervise, to be available to consult on some of the more challenging cases that they may come across. But there's almost no difference between a nurse practitioner and a physician if you get a good one. I mean, they can prescribe, they know how to look at your lab results, they know how to make sure that the drug interactions are okay and you're being safe. Like, it's almost the same thing, and many, you can argue it's better than seeing a physician because they're not as bombarded, although these days in California they are. I mean, the nurse practitioners are busy, but I was just having this conversation with one of my PIs today, and he brought in a new nurse practitioner. And at this particular site, this PI, I'm always asking him for sub-Is because as I practice what I preach in this case, I'm always telling you add to your add physicians, continue adding physicians to your clinic, continue bringing on new sub-investigators to your research clinic, because you should never depend on one PI. Even in our case, we have a solid relationship. The PI is a co-owner of the site with me, but you never know. He could be sick, he could go on vacation, he could just want to retire. You don't want to be dependent on one PI, no matter what the situation is. So, I'm always asking, hey, send me another colleague, send me a colleague. The challenge we've been having is that the colleagues that he's been sending have been other psychiatrists, and they are extremely busy. They might be more busy than he is, right? They run around different hospitals, they make their hospital rounds, they make their nursing home rounds, they make the private practice rounds. They just don't have time to come into the office and do a GCP training when I need them to do it, or do a protocol specific training, or meet with a monitor, or refer a patient. I mean, they're running at a million miles an hour. So, we've been having this challenge over the last 2 years of bringing on stable sub-Is. And today he brought a nurse practitioner. And he said, you know what? His exact words were, these nurse practitioners, they have more availability and they're willing to hustle more for you. Right? Meaning, they're willing to send you patients because they're hungrier, right? They're not compensated as much, so they got to work harder, and they're willing to do research, and they're willing to refer patients, and they're willing to do fee for service. So it's a perfect setup. I think that if you partner with the right nurse practitioner, now mind you, a nurse practitioner can never be a PI, okay? And I should probably never say never, because there's probably been cases where nurse practitioners are PIs, but it's just not the norm, okay? It's like the eclipse we just witnessed a couple months ago, right? Like, you could never say never. Eclipses don't happen, but they're not the norm. Most of the time, there is no eclipse. So, Same thing with nurse practitioner. Yes, there probably have been nurse practitioner PIs in the past, but it's just not the norm. It doesn't happen. Okay, you can't count on it. You can't bank on it. We're not going to see another eclipse like that in another 20 years or whatever the case may be. So hopefully this analogy makes sense. But nurse practitioners make excellent sub-investigators. Okay, first of all, they can do everything your PI does. Check with your states. Every state has a little different requirements of what assessments an NP can do, but in most states, they can do anything a physician can do. All right? So, that's a backup for your PI. That's what a sub-I is supposed to be. They can refer patients. Why? Because they can have a private practice of their own without a physician. They need a physician supervision, but the physician does not need to be involved in the private practice of the nurse practitioner. So, now they have patients to enroll into your studies, right? Now they can do the assessments. Now they have more availability. They can meet with your monitors. Nurse practitioners are the way to go. So, how do you find nurse practitioners? Well, the same way you would find another physician is the best way is to go through your existing PI. And if your PI doesn't know of any, they probably will, because the nurse practitioners end up finding them, right? Like if you have a PI and he's well known or just fairly well known in your area, he probably knows, or she probably knows, numerous nurse practitioners. So he may need to go in his Rolodex or look up his contacts on LinkedIn, but they have connections. So that's one way to get the nurse practitioners. That's probably the best way. Okay. Another way is just to Google them. Like go online. They can have their own private practices. I know of 3 within a 10-mile radius of me right now, off the top of my head, that have their own private practice and that see patients just like a doctor. So go in their office and talk to them about research. Chances are you're still going to run into a gatekeeper, but they may be more approachable because they're not physicians and they're usually not approached by people trying to sell them stuff. I mean, they still get sales reps, right? But they're probably not as desirable to the pharma companies as a physician would be. So that's one thing, the one way or 2 ways you can get a nurse practitioner, right? And online, door knock, referrals from your PI. That should be enough ways to go about it. Now, a close next best option to a nurse practitioner is a physician's assistant. Now, they can't do everything that a nurse practitioner can do. I believe, at least in California, a physician assistant cannot have a private practice of their own, and all the billing needs to go through a physician, whereas a nurse practitioner can do their own billing. But from a research perspective, you could care less about that. Okay, you just want patients, you want a clinician that can serve as a solid backup to your PI that is able to do and knowledgeable to do certain assessments for your particular studies. So chances are the physician you work with knows a nurse practitioner or knows a physician assistant or knows both. And guess what? It wouldn't hurt to get both of them because you can never have enough clinicians because they have patients. And what's the saying in this industry? You never have enough patients. Every single study is behind on enrollment. Patient recruitment is the number one biggest problem in all of clinical research. So you need to add more people to your you need to add more clinicians to your private practice or to your clinical research practice. That's the bottom line. I don't know if this podcast is going to go any longer than this because it's pretty straightforward, but that's what I believe you should do. At one of my clinics, it's funny because when it rains, it pours. I was at one of my sites today. The PI brought a nurse practitioner with him yesterday, and matter of fact, all week this week, this is Friday, all week this week, I was at one of my other clinics we're actually trying to recruit 3 nurse practitioners to our office because we actually own that building. And we not only want them to do research, we want them to actually set up their own private practices within our site so that we can do, and there are different type of nurse practitioners too. We have a general medicine nurse practitioner and then 2 psychiatric nurse practitioners because we specialize in psychiatric trials, but we also want to open ourselves up to general medicine studies because 80% of studies out there are general medicine studies. So if you have a general medicine physician or a nurse practitioner, they can be your you can do 80% of the trials that are out there, or maybe it's not that high, maybe it's a little lower. But here's the thing with our site. Let's use this as an example. Okay, our PI is a neurologist at this one particular site. And this neurologist is not going to be the supervising physician of these nurse practitioners. They have their own supervising physicians, which we will never probably meet because they're, again, like I said, they're not required to be in the same private practice as the nurse practitioner. They just need to be in the state, right? They need to be a licensed physician in the state. That's it. So even these nurse practitioners were joking about the fact that, yeah, they're supervising physicians. They don't even know their name. Like, they called them once to ask them a question about something, and the supervising physician, who the nurse practitioner is paying money to, didn't even remember her name. So it's not like we're going to get these doctors as well as the nurse practitioners, although that could happen. But our PI is a neurologist. She will not be a supervising physician. We will have 2 psychiatric nurse practitioners setting up a private practice in our research clinic building because it's about a 4,000 square foot building, and we're only using roughly 2,000 square feet for the research side, and so the other 2,000 is empty right now, and it's going to be for the private practice. So 2 psychiatric nurse practitioners and 1 general medicine nurse practitioner, and our PI will now be able to get general medicine studies even though she's a neurologist, because we have a general medicine nurse practitioner who's going to be extremely involved in the study and in the recruitment aspects and have her own share of oversight. Of course, the PI is the ultimate overseer, and our PI is very experienced, but she doesn't have those kind of patients, right, for general medicine studies. But now with a nurse practitioner, we do. And the nurse practitioner has all the industry knowledge and the clinical knowledge that it takes for these general medicine studies to pull them off and to execute them. So it's a match made in heaven. Nurse practitioners, I don't think I've ever heard of someone in this space talking about nurse practitioners being a valuable asset. I know even myself, I'm always talking about the physicians, right? You got to have a physician when you do when you open a research clinic. Well, you do need a physician to be a PI, but maybe you need a nurse practitioner to do all the study assessments and to refer all the patients, and then use their supervising physician, if they're a little more involved than the scenarios I just described, to be the PI. So, in a nutshell, that's the way it is. Nurse practitioner is the way to go, and it should not replace you looking for PIs. If doctors come to you or you continue reaching out to physicians, you still need to be doing that. You can never have too many sub-investigators affiliated with your site. You don't need to put all of them on every study you do, but you can never have enough. Like today, we just got a gastro study, and I called my PI and said, hey, I need a GI specialist, and he gave me a name, and now we got a sub-I. So that's the way you do it, but also get nurse practitioners because no one's talking about them, no one's really approaching them. You can pay them less, they have more time, they have just as many patients, they have almost just as much knowledge, maybe the same, sometimes more, depends who you talk to. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching. Nurse practitioners, go get them. Let me know if this works out for you. Hopefully it does. Reach out to me anytime. Text me, 949-415-6256. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm trying to grow that platform. Dan Sfera. Thank you, everyone. Take care.